Welcome to Horror Sector. Tonight we're diving into the darkest corners of the delivery world, where ordinary routes turn into nightmares. 3 drivers, 3 deliveries that changed everything. From mysterious packages that seem to have a life of their own, to ghost children laughing in empty back seats, to entire towns that shouldn't exist. These aren't just stories. These are real experiences from people who face the unexplainable while just trying to do their jobs. Before we begin, make sure you're somewhere safe, because once you hear what happened to Richard, Alonso, and Mauricio, you'll never look at a delivery driver the same way again. Let's begin. My name is Richard, and I've been working as a delivery driver for a year and a half. I usually work during the day and in the evenings, but on weekends I work until around noon to take advantage of the bonuses and offers on the app I use. That way I earn some extra money and all that. I hadn't had any problems until about a month ago when I made a very strange delivery to a remote location. First, I went to the restaurant to pick up the order. It's supposed to be a fried chicken restaurant, not a chain, but a local place. I went up there, and although I expected to receive the typical sealed bag with the restaurant's logo, what I got was a medium-sized cardboard box from a rather nervous employee. "Don't open it," he said. That went without saying. I knew packages should never be opened, but it made me quite nervous that it was such a strange package. What was inside? I wanted to ask him what was going on, but he ran back inside the restaurant, and there I was, stuck with that odd box in my hands. Honestly, I wasn't worried that there was anything dangerous or illegal inside, because I had made deliveries from this restaurant before, and it was a pretty normal place. But something about this delivery felt different. I put the box in my delivery bag, slung it over my shoulder, and set off for my destination. The truth is, the neighborhood I had to go to was a bit far, almost an hour's drive. It was a warm night, and I was listening to music very quietly with my headphones. I was driving at a constant speed when suddenly, I felt a car pull up behind me and start honking and flashing its lights. I found it quite strange. I signaled for it to pass me on the left, but it kept honking. I slowed down a bit and pulled alongside, and from its window, the driver yelled, "Your bag is open!" I panicked, thinking I'd dropped the package. I pulled over as quickly as I could and checked. The bag was open, but thankfully the box was still inside. How had the zipper come undone? I have no idea, but I sighed with relief and zipped it back up, this time making sure it was properly sealed. I put my bag back on and started driving again. This time it wasn't a horn or any other sound that distracted me, but a sensation in my back, like when someone taps you in the middle of your back to get your attention. I adjusted my bag with a movement, thinking that maybe I had put my backpack on wrong, or that perhaps the box inside had shifted and a corner was touching my back. However, a minute later I felt very clearly how something was poking my back, like a finger. I braked immediately and pulled over again. I checked inside my bag and there was only that box in its place. I remained silent, waiting to hear an animal or something, but nothing. I was starting to get nervous and felt a strong temptation to open that box and see what I was carrying. I had a bad feeling, as if I was getting into something dangerous. But I remembered what the guy at the store told me and I calmed down. I closed the bag again. I crossed myself as I put it on and started the motorcycle again. I hadn't been driving for even 10 minutes when I felt those tapping noises again and heard something moving in the cargo box. I didn't know what to do. Was I transporting a live animal or something? I started to accelerate and suddenly something I can't quite explain began to happen. Anyone who's ridden a motorcycle knows that if someone behind you puts a lot of weight or force on the bike, you can lose control. Well, that's what happened to me. Little by little, I felt the bag on my back getting heavier and heavier to the point where it felt like I was riding with a passenger hanging off my back. I pulled over again, this time in the middle of a panic attack. I put the bag on the ground while cars drove by honking at me. I yanked open my bag and there it was, that closed box, silent and motionless, just a box sealed with duct tape. I sighed heavily, knowing I had to get out of there, or if a cop saw me, my problem would be even worse. I was only halfway to the delivery location. I put my bag back on and this time, I told myself that whatever happened, I would get there, deliver the package, get paid, and leave without conversation, without questions, a simple transaction. I swear to God, the whole way there I felt a terrible discomfort in my neck and back, like I was carrying a bag full of heavy rocks. I felt something pricking my back. I kept hearing tapping noises, and worse, I could feel someone sitting behind me. I checked the rearview mirror and there was no one there, but the feeling remained. I generally don't like speed. I'm a very cautious driver because I'm afraid I'll fall off my motorcycle someday. But that night I accelerated as fast as I could. I didn't start braking until I reached the delivery location, which in itself wasn't in the neighborhood I was headed to, but further on the outskirts, up a hill with very few houses. Near the top, where I could see a cross that stood out against the sky, there was a small house. The phone told me that was the address, and I didn't want to get off the motorcycle, but anything to deliver that damned package. I rode trembling toward the house and knocked 3 times loudly on the wooden door just before putting the bag down to get the box out. As soon as I lifted it, the door opened, and a very old woman opened it. She gave me a dirty look, saw the box, snatched it from my hands and put it inside. That's when I went in, being curious. My gaze drifted inside. Between the dirt floor and the worn furniture, I managed to see several black candles, strange herbs, and an odd altar with saints, photos covered in scribbles, and small bones of what I like to think were animals. That's when I understood. I was running an errand for a witch. My heart sank and I looked away, but it was too late. I don't know how, but she noticed me staring and asked if I wanted to come in. I shook my head and mumbled that I couldn't because of the app's rules. She laughed and asked if I didn't want to know what was in the box. I politely replied again that it wasn't my place to ask and casually mentioned the price of the delivery. Suddenly, she glared at me again. She checked the pocket of her black dress and pulled out the exact sum she owed me. She slammed the door in my face and I practically ran back to my motorcycle. I sat down and looked back at the woman's shack. She was now watching me from the window. I tried to start it, but I couldn't. No matter how much I kicked it, the motorcycle wouldn't start, not until the woman moved away from the window. I don't know how much power that woman has or how she acquired it. I don't want to know, but she was definitely capable of keeping me there if that's what she wanted. Luckily, she let me go. And I don't think I've ever driven that fast, but I wanted to put as much distance between us as possible. I almost had an accident at the entrance to the neighborhood. I slammed on the brakes, and an old man sitting on the corner saw me and yelled at me to calm down, asking what was wrong. I was clutching him to my chest, so I got out and told him what had happened. That man, I don't know his name, helped me calm down. "Relax, son," he said. "That woman is very bad, but it's clear she didn't want anything to do with you. You gave her what she wanted, and she let you go. That's what matters." I sighed with relief after telling him what I'd been through, and importantly, feeling that he'd believed me. I got on my motorcycle, and before leaving, I asked him if he knew what I had in that package. He didn't answer right away and instead asked me if I had opened the box. On one of those many times I'd gotten off to check it, I told him no, and then he nodded and said, "It's better that way. Stay curious. There are some things that are better left unknown." I knew instantly that he knew a lot of things I hadn't thought to press, but I only had to think about it for a second to give up. I agreed with him and left. And to this day, I have no idea what I was carrying on my back for almost an hour. I also don't know what that fried chicken restaurant has to do with a witch an hour away, but just in case. When I see that restaurant is going to be a night delivery, I think twice and let someone else take it. I hope I never have to see that woman again. My name is Alonso, and I've been working as a delivery driver for a few months now. The truth is, this job exposes you to a lot of strange experiences, especially at night. There's never a shortage of suspicious customers who ask for things out of the ordinary, who downright do strange things or behave in a threatening manner. I've talked to some colleagues, and they tell me I've also had a bit of bad luck, and I have to agree with them. Not content with everything I've experienced with strange customers, something more paranormal happened to me recently. Look, I don't doubt there's a logical explanation. I don't believe in these things as much as I enjoy listening to scary stories. But anyway, I still haven't figured out what could have caused these sounds. It all happened one Friday night, and I was pretty busy. People tend to order fast food much more often on weekends. I work for an app that has me deliver orders to customers at different restaurants and all that. I agreed to make a delivery in a somewhat out-of-the-way neighborhood, but the pay was good for the distance, so I drove off in my car in that direction. I regretted accepting that trip pretty quickly. I'm relatively new to the city where I live, so I didn't know I was going to encounter such a rundown street. There were no streetlights, and I had to dodge potholes as I drove very slowly. I was nervous because it's on streets like that where criminals, thieves, hide to be more likely to rob you. It was easy. Seriously, it was a very lonely road, and above all, very quiet. There were no houses or anything around, except for trees and weeds. Finally, I saw the first lights in the distance and arrived at the neighborhood I was heading to. I found the house relatively quickly, and this is when things got strange. From my car, I saw a rather humble little house with flowers outside and the light off. I checked the address again, and yes, it was that house. I got out of the car with 2 bags full of food, but before I could knock, the door opened, and a young girl, about 15 years old, dressed in white and with a smile on her face, answered. She had brown skin and deep blue eyes, messy hair, and super white teeth. I noticed she glanced toward the car and smiled at me in a way I can only interpret now as mocking, before asking in a whisper, "You came alone?" I didn't know what to say, but I did feel something strange on my spine. A chill ran down my spine as she snatched the 2 bags from my hand and handed me back 200 pesos. I put the bill away and was just about to give her the change when she told me to keep it. About 50 pesos as a tip. What a generous girl. But then I remembered, yes, I came alone. Why? Are you sure? She kept smiling at me, and I didn't quite know why she was so happy, but I hadn't intended to stay there talking to a teenager. She stepped back and closed the door, saying goodnight without losing her happy, mocking expression. To this day, that girl remains an enigma to me, and I don't know if she was involved in what happened a few minutes later, or if she simply saw something I didn't and let me go, knowing deep down what would happen to me. I won't lie to you. At that moment, despite the confusion caused by that strange situation, I felt incredibly happy because a little girl who probably didn't understand the value of money had just given me a wonderful tip. I walked to the car, and maybe my eyes deceived me, but for a moment I saw a faint reflection inside. I had locked the doors, but you never know, so I glanced behind me as soon as I got in. There was no one in the back seat, or under the seats, or anything like that. I was alone. I'm sure I was alone. I started the car to head back to the city, and just as I began driving along that poorly lit road from the beginning, I heard the first giggle that made me jump in my seat and look behind me in dismay. It was a childish giggle, but not distant like in a faraway house. I didn't hear it coming from inside the car next to me. Goosebumps prickled my skin, and I thought about stopping the car and checking to see if anyone was hiding, but I panicked at the mere thought of stopping in the middle of the road. I didn't want my car stolen. It's my only source of income right now. I kept driving, trying to convince myself that the laughter came from a nearby house or something. That was impossible, and I knew it because there wasn't a house nearby. When I heard a second burst of laughter from a child inside the car, I floored the accelerator and fixed my gaze straight ahead, indifferent to the potholes in the road. I didn't care if I had to go to the mechanic the next day for having destroyed my shock absorbers. I had to get off that road, and God forbid I should look in the rearview mirror. I felt a terrible chill on the back of my neck and knew that even though I couldn't see it when I turned around, there was something in the back seat. Suddenly, an intrusive thought began to take hold of me. I was focused on avoiding the potholes while I heard giggles every now and then. And suddenly, something inside me told me to look in the rearview mirror. That was the last straw. What if there was something in the rearview mirror? The fright would kill me. I could lose control of the car. I even resisted looking in the rearview mirror. Fear kept my gaze fixed on the front, but at the same time, out of the corner of my eye, I could sense something moving, someone moving in the seat behind me. Again, a mocking giggle sounded behind me. I jumped in my seat when I hit a pothole, and my gaze instinctively went to the rearview mirror. I saw 2 kids, about 8 or 9 years old, laughing at me in the back seat. I don't know how loud I screamed, because for a moment, the world seemed to go deaf. I jumped out of the car and stood on the side of the road, staring back at my car. Obviously, there were no kids in the back seat. I ran back inside and grabbed my phone to call my brother. He's a delivery driver too, so he was at work, but I explained that I needed his help and tearfully told him everything that had happened. We're very close, and even though he didn't understand what I was talking about, he came to my aid. He convinced me to get back in my car, and I followed him the whole time. I didn't hear the giggling again, although my imagination kept playing tricks on me. I could feel something moving in the back seat, and it didn't stop until we got back to the city. Without a doubt, one of the worst experiences of my life. I never accepted another ride to that neighborhood, and although I kept working that night, I honestly couldn't. I tried to put the whole thing out of my head for days. The next morning, I meticulously checked my car. I looked for microphones, cameras, a phone, anything someone could have placed inside or outside to generate the laughter I'd been hearing. But I found nothing. And even if it had been a microphone, how could I explain what I saw in the rearview mirror? I have no idea. I'm still a bit skeptical, maybe out of stubbornness or because something inside me refuses to accept that I really did see 2 spirits in the back of my car. The only thing I'm sure of is that the girl who received the package that night foresaw what would happen to me. I don't know if it was because she saw the children in my car, but I've heard in that neighborhood that there are a couple of little kids who scare drivers at night. My sister-in-law even suggested that maybe that young woman was responsible. I don't know how that would be possible, but if there's even a remote possibility that it is, I'd rather not find out how she did it. I hope you're doing well. My name is Mauricio, and I'm from El Salvador. I've been a delivery driver for a long time, and because of the situation in my country several years ago, I can safely say that my job was very high risk. Gangs controlled every corner of the country, and in my line of work, I encountered a lot of crime and evil. But people had to keep living. They kept buying things online, and someone had to deliver those things to their homes or to the stores. Because of this, I've witnessed many disturbing things, but this experience I had just a year ago was one of the strangest, most chilling, and most inexplicable of my repertoire. You see, with the gangs gone, the roads are safer now. Currently, I'm working for a shipping company that delivers clothing, shoes, and general beauty products. Our warehouse is on the outskirts of a city, and we supply almost the entire state. One afternoon, shortly before the end of the day, my boss asked me to deliver some packages to a group of stores in a neighboring town about an hour away. I really didn't want to go. I was tired and all, but he was going to pay me a bonus for the distance, and I really needed the money, so I agreed. I got in the company van. They loaded the packages I was going to deliver in the back seat, and in 5 minutes I was already on the road with the GPS guiding me to where I needed to go. As I said, the roads are safer now, and although I still maintain the habit of looking in all directions, paying attention to the road and the side of the road, I allow myself to put on music, podcasts, and things like that to make the trip more bearable. Coincidentally, that day I put on some relaxing content to calm myself as night slowly fell around me. The road was empty, and I felt that the atmosphere perfectly complemented what I was listening to. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I started to feel my ears getting warm and a rather unpleasant chill creeping up my legs. I suppose all of that was just a prelude to what was about to happen. I noticed the GPS had a slight glitch, and although I didn't know that route very well, I knew that to reach my destination I had to keep going straight ahead for at least another half hour. I ignored it and continued driving as night fell and a thick fog began to envelop the truck. I turned on the headlights and the cold intensified. Raindrops began to fall on the windshield, and I felt incredibly frustrated because if only I had said no to my boss, I would have been home by now. The GPS arrow suddenly started spinning wildly, and then the map went blank as if there were no route at all. That really made me nervous, but I assumed it was because of the rain. I took a deep breath and continued on my way, or at least I tried to. The truth is, just a few meters ahead, I found the road blocked off with several cones and police tape. I put my hands to my head because if the road was closed, then I'd have to take a detour. I noticed a policeman standing still by the blockade, staring into space. He looked young and rather dirty, unfazed by the rain. I didn't really want to get out of the van, but I wanted to know what had happened. I put on my sweater and got out of the van. I walked toward him, waving from afar, but the policeman didn't answer until I spoke to him. "Good evening. Excuse me for the road closure." He turned toward me very slowly, and I felt petrified by his gaze. It was expressionless, empty. He raised a trembling finger and pointed toward a nearby road leading into town. Then, in the weakest voice I've ever heard, as if he were struggling to breathe, he said, "Accident, take this way into town." It's hard to put into words, but at that moment I felt surrounded, as if I were in the middle of a crowd. It was as if more people were surrounding me, complaining that the road was blocked. I shook myself sharply because he kept staring at me, and that made me very nervous. I said goodbye as politely as I could and slowly backed away toward the highway without breaking eye contact. He looked ahead again and whispered something I could barely understand. "Take care." I set off again in the persistent drizzle, and the first thing I noticed, as soon as I entered the town and started walking along a narrow asphalt street, was that there wasn't a single street lamp on. Combined with the fog and the drizzle, it was very difficult to see the road ahead. I began to lament what was happening to me, convinced it was my fault for having said yes to my boss. My legs were freezing, and my hands were stiff around the steering wheel. Little by little, out of the corner of my eye, I began to notice shadows, as if people were walking around my truck. Because, yes, I was driving very slowly to avoid any accidents, lest a child run out of a house and I not have time to brake. I was nervous, anxious, because something inside me told me that this place wasn't normal. Not even a single light on inside the houses seemed impossible. And no sooner had I thought that than I saw a light from a house ahead turn on, allowing me to make out someone's silhouette, a woman perhaps, because she had long hair. I stared at him, but against the light and through all that fog, it was impossible to see his features. I walked past, but this happened a couple of times with other houses and other people. They were watching me as if I didn't belong there, as if I shouldn't be there. People appeared like shadows from behind unlit streetlights, and I didn't know what to think. And although I didn't immediately believe it was something supernatural, I knew I wasn't in a safe place. Something was happening. Suddenly, I felt a loud bang on the back of the truck. I tried to look in the side mirror, but there was no one there. I turned inside and turned on the light, but there were only the packages I had to deliver and me in the van. I started hyperventilating and slowly accelerated as I wound through those unfamiliar streets, desperately hoping the GPS would work again. I stared at the GPS for a moment, frantically pressing buttons as I began to hear whispers outside the truck. I listened intently, but couldn't understand anything except that they were wailing sounds. By then, the rain had stopped, but I still had the window rolled up and the locks down. That was my only defense, a measly pane of glass that wouldn't protect me from anyone who crossed my path. It was like stepping back in time to that horrible era when death lurked on the roads. Suddenly, when I looked up, I saw what I had so often successfully avoided in the past. My heart sank when 3 tattooed men appeared in front of the van. I slammed on the brakes, screaming inside the vehicle as they glared at me with furious expressions. I raised my hands, thinking they were going to do something to me, but they just stood there watching me until 2 of them moved off the road. I watched them until they vanished into the fog. The only one still in front of me, the one in the middle, raised his finger and pointed to a street that went down to the left. Then he backed up until my streetlights no longer illuminated him, disappearing into the darkness of the night. It took me several minutes to decide what to do, crying in my seat because I didn't know if it was a trap or not. The whispers continued around me, and I felt more bumps from behind that made me press the accelerator and swerve to the left. Up until that moment, everything had been very tense, and my heart was in my throat, waiting for it all to end. I saw the road below, lit by streetlights, and felt it was all about to end, but the specters that had trapped me in their village had one last thing to say. Suddenly, I heard atrocious screams and a barrage of gunfire. I floored the accelerator and merged onto the road almost without braking as I felt a bullet hit the van's body. Thank God I didn't roll the van, but I couldn't calm down until I was about 2 or 3 kilometers away and the GPS started working on us again. I looked closely at the small map, and there wasn't a town in sight. I had no peace for the rest of the trip. The entire trip I was replaying what I saw, trying to understand what I had witnessed, and I remembered things, details I had overlooked at the time, ignored because of the intensity of the moment, like how the dirt on the policeman's uniform appeared red under my van's headlights, or that those gang members had bullet wounds. They're tattoos, I thought at the time, but in retrospect it was obvious they weren't. Later I inspected the van's bodywork down to the millimeter, but the famous bullet impact I felt echoing throughout the van's storage area wasn't there. It took me weeks to accept that it had been something paranormal. When I returned along the same route, more later that afternoon, there were no roadblocks or accidents, and from the other side of the highway I could see the road leading into the town, now dilapidated and abandoned. Today, I know I was in a ghost town, although I can't explain how something like that was possible. The truth is, I couldn't find any information about that mysterious ghost town. Nobody knew of any lost town along that route, except for a secretary in the administrative department of my company who told me that a small group of people moved there a long time ago, building very precarious houses made of sheet metal and cardboard. But she doesn't know what became of them either. There are no records, no old news articles, no evidence, no police reports from the gang era, nothing. Only God knows what happened in that place, and I only pray that nothing like that ever happens to me again or is repeated. And there you have it. 3 delivery drivers, 3 encounters with the supernatural that they'll never forget. If these stories kept you on the edge of your seat, don't leave just yet. Horror Sector has dozens more terrifying true stories waiting for you. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss when we venture into the next dark corner of reality. Have you ever experienced something paranormal while working late at night? Share your story in the comments below. It might be featured in our next episode. Remember, the scariest stories are the ones that really happened. Until next time, stay safe out there, and thank you for entering the Horror Sector.